All right, you all have been here before. You know my rules. I don't have to repeat myself, but I will say if I am reading a super chat, please be mindful because those are precious tokens this evening. The chat is failing horribly. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to kick off the gauntlet, and maybe we just get a little refresher. Everybody in the chat can feel a little refreshed in a new chat, and maybe we'll kind of spice it up a little. And so I'll kick off the gauntlet here in just a second, and we'll raid over there in a few minutes. All right, Ryan, you were first in line back there. What you got for us, darling?
Yeah, my question is a little bit tangential. Ivan mentioned at one point that he was convinced that he lost out on jobs for being a white man. And I'm just curious, how did you figure out that you lost those jobs for being a white man and not just for being an insufferable prick?
Dude, why should I reply to you? You're just a bitch.
You don't have to. I'm just curious. Okay, so you don't have any. So you have no reason to believe that you lost those jobs for being a white man. So you're probably just lying about that.
Are you just here to shoot shots at folks?
I was gonna say.
Maybe I am.
Well, we can let's open that. Let's open that topic, okay? In terms of, we don't have to go into Ivan's personal life on it, but let's open the topic to the idea: does autocracy prevent that from happening? Because essentially, we're going to have all of the same people with the same beliefs and the same backgrounds and the same color skin and whatever going on. I'm guessing, or we won't have to worry about DEI because of that. Does autocracy prevent stuff like that from happening?
I don't think so. Do you, Ivan?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
I opened the topic. Does autocracy protect the citizens from dealing with like DEI issues and things of that nature? Because everyone essentially has the same religion, the same color skin, the same background, the same influence, the same philosophy or belief system, so on and so forth.
It's a good question. I would be tempted to say that it doesn't inherently, but fundamentally, I would say that you would want to do that anyway if you have an autocracy. So
what if we get an autocracy where our autocrat at the top is one of these feminists who comes on these debate panels, and her spiritual imposition on the autocratic state is the divine feminine? Okay, right? We get the Lavaloon of the world who did, like that sounds, maybe we just get reverse DEI from your autocracy. Is that
it will be a short rule. I mean, my argument is not my preference of what I want.
No, I
ultimately, it's. I think that if you're misaligned with reality, you're gonna get pushback from that.
That actually happened with like a lot of monarchs during like the Enlightenment, where they were hyper liberal, but their like population was mostly conservative and reactionary, where they tried to push reforms, but they got pushed back. So much so that some of them had to be deposed and their children had to replace them. So, yeah, it's funny how that works. People go and rebel because they want you to be intolerant when the ruler is tolerant. I think that happened to the king who was beheaded, and then Cromwell was the regent.
But doesn't the autocracy
people you're not
base off of the individual?
Sorry, go ahead, CaucSquatch.
But doesn't each autocracy base off the individual in command? I mean, king down, whatever. Wouldn't very much like the Stalin-esque purges of yore be something that would take place in that type of a environment?
Yeah.
No, that presupposes individualism.
Individualism is a thing, sir.
No,
you're not an individual.
That's a very low IQ take. Sorry, bro.
Sasquatch. I'd say I would say like something that's more important than the personality or the skill of the monarch is the aristocracy behind them. Like if you look at something like China, that's more absolute power. Whereas if you look at like England, where they tend to have like a bunch of shit kings that ended up having the nobles take more and more power, then you would see that it doesn't really matter what the monarch does. It just matters what the parliament wants.
Okay, but we're speaking of autocracy, which sort of bypasses the parliamentary procedure. We're talking a top-down structure where an individual, right, a person, a single autarch has command? Or am I completely misreading this word?
I think
Well,
you're
argument
creating.
the argument he's
Go ahead,
presenting
Nicholas.
suggests that autarch could occasionally be held accountable, whether that's to the sort of shifting sands and estimations of history, or to the people who could uprise against them. And I think what you see in the history of like the development of English common law is exactly maybe what he's expecting, which is part of why I think it's good. But that you end up with an autocrat that people don't like, and then whether it's the nobles or the people, there's going to be some sort of exercise of physical force, like we're going to sit you down and make you sign the Magna Carta that places some restrictions on what you can do with our freaking property, right? So I just view it as like an inevitable decline of autocracy.
Magna Carta, by the way, in the 1200s, far before the Enlightenment.
Yes, a little bit before.
That kind of brings up a point that Ivan mentioned earlier about legitimacy, and you said that we're confusing, or Eucharist was maybe confusing the legitimacy of the autocrat with something else. Wouldn't autocracy denote legitimacy? Wouldn't that be a thing? Like, you can't get rid of autocracy because that's the legitimate king. That's the ruler. You follow
Are you
his
speaking of a mandate from heaven?
No, you can overthrow them.
Am I off on that, Ivan?
It's not self-referential. It's not self-referential. To answer to part of what Eucharist was saying about my position, he was correct. But the other part of it was that actually people didn't think of themselves as individuals until pretty late into intellectual history. The concept of person and the concept of individual are different. In Orthodox theology, for example, there is a big strain of thought that goes against individualism as a concept, because it presupposes that people are not collectively joined together and interpenetrating themselves, spiritually speaking. So, for example, even if you look at the Bible, even the first books, like the book of Genesis, you have the concept of, for example, you will separate from your parents to marry, right? And the problem there is that if you live with your parents, for example, you're sharing in their same spirit. When you cleave off from your parents and you become one flesh with your woman, now you're sharing the same spirit with your woman. So the idea wasn't that you're this closed off individual, that you're basically able to monarchically like deflect any influence from outside you that you don't like. It's like you're gonna be tainted by it whether you want it or not, simply by being in touch with it. So to answer to CaucSquatch first question, like, I don't believe we're individuals. I believe we're persons, and personhood implies a mysterious dimension, which is I don't even know how much of a person I am, because I don't have access to the total interiority that is going on in my personhood, and I cannot fundamentally block each other, like other people, out of my ways of thinking, etc. And to answer to Clay, so I think if you take that idea of personhood, that already implies that not only can you not be self-referential, but you're forced to interact with other people, and that conditions you even if you don't want it. So it's not that autocracy means, oh, I'm God above everybody else. That's one form of autocracy that clearly didn't last in history. I would say it would be much more useful to think of autocracy as the person whose authority we follow because they're closer, let's say, to the spiritual reality we're supposed to inhabit. So some societies had that as a priest king, some societies had it as a god king, some societies had as an anointed king. And basically that's the idea. It's not that, oh, I am God. It's okay, God speaks to me in particular. Like, take Prophet Moses, for example. Like, Prophet Moses had a particular relationship with God that the people of Israel didn't. And the whole question that Moses poses God is, God, you're going to come down to us, that will obliterate us. So please let's give me more mediation, because this will turn out bad for the people of Israel, right? And that's ideally within that frame what makes Moses a good person, because Moses is actually performing the role of a priest within that community, but he's also the political leader of that community.
So my follow up to it would be something to the cultish nature of organizations, religions, political affiliations, things like that. How would it be that I would or should put my trust in other men who claim autocracy?
You can't. There is no justification for that. It either takes trust, coercion, or a combination of those two.
Do you believe in free will?
And before you answer that, to the chat, if you're watching on the tomato side, we are moving to the gauntlet now. I'm shutting down the tomato side. So please feel free to either catch the raid or make your way over through the link that I dropped in the chat. Thank you so kindly to you.
Yeah, I do. I do believe in free will.
I actually have a more good faith question than my initial one, Ivan. So it sounds like what you were describing earlier, if I understood it correctly, is that you believe like societies will kind of naturally steer towards autocracy because of like human nature.
Did you just not like my question, or just decide to overrun it?
No, he said yes. He believes in free will. What do you mean?
Okay.
He answered it. I'm sorry.
I slipped out for a second. My bad.
Oh yeah, he said yes. Yeah. Well, like, because if I understood that correctly, and you're saying that we would steer towards autocracy because of human nature, then we also seem to another thing you kind of suggested is that we go through these phases, right, of like more liberal democracy type beats and autocratic ones. And if that's the case, then why doesn't it make sense that human nature seems to just feature both of these phases? Like the human nature, if human nature alternates between those, then isn't that human nature in and of itself just doing its thing?
Well, that is a very good question. I would have to say that even the concept of human nature is very complicated. I don't hold to being able to define human nature as such completely. I can only speak of what I believe I know about human nature. And when you say, well, shouldn't you have to choose either one or the other for it to be consistent with your human nature? I think if you were to make that argument, you would have to flatten the spiritual reality to make it a deterministic situation where basically you don't have a spiritual choice in the matter. But maybe it's a logic that exceeds human cognition. So, for example, maybe the cycles are so big that we cannot comprehend it. Maybe Nietzsche was right and there's an eternal return, and maybe Hegel was right. The point is, these cycles are so big that ultimately what I would look at as a guiding post would be culture, religion, and personal spirituality. So you could have both, but the problem is not, or why do we have both, and why doesn't the autocracy simply dominate everything? The thing is that it would be, a Christian would have to say something like, well, because of original sin, because like people sin, so they lose good things because they're pursuing bad things that they like more than the good things. And that's basically the concept of the fall and of sin itself. Now, I don't know if I could think of the opposite. If democracy was good and autocracy was bad, why would democracy fall into autocracy? You could use the same. You could use the same argument, but maybe with a different metaphysical presupposition.
And Bucket Button comes in with a big 5, says the irony of the most insufferable liberal prick calling anyone else anything other than daddy. Adorable. Also, Evan 2028.
I call Sarah mommy.
A lot of you call me mommy. Noog also says, which panelists have been trapped in a woman's body? No, none. Okay.
Bueller.
I mean,
yeah, I guess
prenatal.
Just to clarify a little bit, I think. I guess what I'm describing when I think about like things tending towards that phase of liberal democracy, like it's because under an autocratic system, it naturally breeds resistance, right? You naturally breed people who don't, because there are always going to be people who don't like the autocratic system. There is, which is a strength of liberal democracy. We allow for pluralistic thoughts. So I think that's just Yeah, like either way, you're going to have a tendency where under a liberal democracy, you're going to have people who try to consolidate power, and outside of it, you're going to have people who try to push against the centralization of powers.
Eucharist.
So I have a question that plays off of that really quickly, off of what
Right.
Coda was saying. How can you say that autocracy is better when its only corrective mechanism is overthrowing society? It's like we build in corrective mechanisms in democracy because we know that every leader is a roll of the dice as to whether or not they're a moral human being, no matter what myth they believe, right? So we have correcting mechanisms that can get rid of those pieces of shit. Whereas in an autocracy, you roll the dice once, and if you get a piece of shit, you're stuck with that piece of shit, right? Unless you have to overthrow society. Unless you that's the argument the autocrat people like to make, is that that is your corrective mechanism. But how can that possibly be better? I'll also add on to that, which one of the two has a larger body count throughout history? Because the history seems to be completely absent in this entire debate, as though we do not have thousands of years of examples of the things we're talking about.
Well, if you want an answer to that last question, actually, it was liberal democracies who have the highest body count. Because in the 20th century, there were more deaths than in the rest of history. If you want to count it as body count.
Ivan, I'm sorry to say this, but China completely ruins any sense of that with scale. And they've been autocratic for their entire history. I'd say that's the unfortunate bit about like the part of effigy. Like they've been, like their civil wars, more people died in that than like World War I think.
Oh wait, are we talking about death body count or like?
I can see your misunderstanding.
How many people have these ideologies slept with?
I really was sitting there thinking, I'm like, what does a girl's
You watch
body
way
count?
too much
Like,
whatever podcast,
I'm like,
Sarah.
You guys really drag that body count into every fucking debate, don't you?
I think that might be a little bit of projection there, honey.
Sarah, I think you may have overdosed on red pills.
Yes, that might be a possibility.
Oh, that's so good.
Look.
I love that. At least I clarified.
We could have gone the whole rest of the night if you didn't, and you'd be so confused. Oh my goodness.
Okay, continue.
You know, your facial features while you were trying to parse that out in your head right before you started speaking was absolutely great. You might want to clip it.
I was thinking if I should say this or not because it's potentially very offensive, but I don't know. I think there's a very serious problem if you think that liberal democracies are like somehow less bloody, because I think that, for example, for the US to drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan to civilians, that means
Killed less
a
people than the
different.
firebombing of Japan.
No, but it's not about numbers. I'm not a utilitarian. So it's a different thing if you kill enemy combatant and if you kill a civilian. Like, if I don't care if I shoot 100 soldiers that are on the enemy side, but if I start shooting civilians because I think I'm gonna like hurt the enemy, that's a different moral.
That just kind of bolsters
situation.
our argument, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't, because what you're actually saying is that
does.
no, it doesn't.
How many liberal democracies
saying that-
regularly kill millions of their people?
Yeah, I think it's a fair criticism, right? Like I share your qualms with targeting the civilians. Like if we're just doing America bashing, I'd love to talk about dropping atomic bombs. But I think the question, because you're raising it in this way, like it's a question of which states are more likely to commit terrorist attacks or more likely to kill their own civilians or other people's civilians. And yes, bad examples of democracies doing bad things, but I'm fairly certain the calculus would still fall on autocracies there as being worse body count wise.
Are you talking about morality or are you talking about numbers?
Both. I mean, I think because you brought it up, because you're like, well, you object to saying, well, democracies, don't kill as many people, but democracies did this one bloody thing. Well, if we're going to compare bloody thing to bloody thing, then numbers are going to have to come into it. I'm not saying the numbers make right. I'm just saying, like, if this is just a calculation of which one is more apt or more likely to do the bad thing that we agree is bad, I think autocracies are still worse in the calculation. I will readily admit all the flaws of what democracies have done, But I bring up
to go back to my
Hungary.
question, though,
You don't want to
there
say
are
that
corrective
Hungary is good or
mechanisms
bad.
in
It's just an
democracy.
anecdote, right?
Which I never got an answer on the corrective mechanisms on why there's only one for autocracy, which is
there isn't only one for autocracy. There are many. One of them is being conquered from the outside as well. For example,
Conquered within.
well, that's
Going
not an
back to
argument
the-
for it, is it? I mean,
going back to the original thing about the numbers and morality and such. I mean, I think it's a very good point if I have to be intellectually honest. But at the same time, I would have to ask, like, why is it sheer numbers the measure and not something else? Because, for example, China has a very big population. Like, I'm not a utilitarian, so like, and I'm not a very big math guy. But like, if let's say China had the absolute death toll, but like, it percentage-wise for its population, it's less. Like, but somebody would have to do the math, and like, I think it's a valid argument. In regards to the other question about corrective mechanisms, my argument actually wasn't for the system as a system itself, but what it represented symbolically. And this is not me throwing like a smoke bomb and running away from this question, but it is actually a means of addressing it in the sense that you're talking about mechanisms. Don't interrupt. If you're asking a question, beggars aren't choosers, man. So, like, if you're asking about mechanisms, you didn't really understand the argument at all. Because what I'm saying is, it's not about mechanisms, it's about people. If you have the mechanism can be simply replaced by people, but people cannot be replaced by a mechanism. So you say, oh, there is only one way. No. There is ways, just like in democracy. What democracy has is a mechanism to somehow pretend that such a move isn't upsetting the natural order, because it doesn't do a lot of physical violence. But if we're being honest, let's look at an example like the US, where you literally have people being murdered in the prison, where I would see as more moral an autocrat who says, yes, I sent that person to die, I swung the axe, I killed them, I'm responsible for their death, instead of you having to wonder what happened to Epstein, for example. But that's my moral calculus. I don't expect you to share it immediately.
Effigy, about a point you made about their systems to remove the person. Have we seen any of those actually play out? Because I would say maybe if like Trump was actually impeached his first time and he was said to be removed as president, I think that there would be definitely some resistance on his part. He would drum up his support and he would stop himself, or he would try to stop himself from being removed. So I'd say if you look at like stuff like that, it's one thing to have it laid out theoretically, but to actually have it apply in reality, I don't think we've seen.
No, Eucharist
like
brought this up earlier when he was talking about kind of the same point. Yeah, it's definitely a flaw of democracy that it allows for autocrats to be in the democratic system.
It's not
right?
a flaw.
And autocrats try to fuck up that system as they are trying to do now.
Yeah,
It's
also
not a
Trump did
flaw.
try to remain in power, right? Like there was this whole thing, I don't know if you guys heard of it, there was this event on January 6th of 2021. It was kind of a big deal. There was this whole pressuring campaign to try to convince Mike Pence to overturn the results of the election. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
I'm just
Never
But
heard of it.
I also meant, Evan, I also meant that we just vote different leaders. They don't get to stay. It's built into the system that they don't get to stay, right?
I
Like
see what you mean.
That was kind of the bigger point. But it's also, we have mechanisms that if things go wrong, which, you know, we haven't gotten to that point completely yet, where we can just like try to, the Congress can try to completely impeach a president. We haven't gotten there, but who's to say it wouldn't go completely fine? Like, be like, boom, he's impeached, he's going to go. He's no longer president. He's got to go. Otherwise, he gets drug out. You know, like
Yeah, but
I think it's a serious
that's-
question to ask about the impeachment power because it's hard to do. It's been used rarely and has never actually successfully vacated someone from office except just by them choosing not to run again or whatever. But
Yes, it has.
I think
It has.
the sort of defense that I would offer, is exactly what FG said is like, but we do on an ordinary day have a cycle of peaceful transfer of power that seems to work fairly well, even with people who really want to aggrandize power to themselves. We've convicted politicians at rates that are, I think, historically mind-blowing, right? We have people who've been convicted for corruption or insider trading and all these things. So that's actually kind of cool. I think it's cool when we can hold people accountable. It might be hard if it's the most powerful person and they've aggrandized power to themselves. True. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not about the accumulation of power. It's actually about, let's say, the impossibility that liberalism has to, let's say, be the ultimate arbiter of every single dispute. Because if you alienate enough people, you will simply you have given the autocrat the political base to, if he is to be deposed by an impeachment, he can simply say, to hell with you, I'm taking power by force. And wasn't that the fear that a lot of liberals had with the whole January 6th thing, which is, okay, this guy is very popular, he can drum up his base, and they might actually do political violence in order to put him in power forever. That was the
Well, if he was very popular, he would have won the election, right?
That's not for me to say.
I think it's again, good question,
it.
right? There's an open question of, well, no, it's not even an open question. It's a reality of, as you're saying, if you want to call it force doctrine or whatever, right? There's always the threat in the background of someone of sufficient influence and popularity, mustering the people together to keep themselves in power. That's the way it's always been, regardless of what structure of government we put in place. So 100% agreed, that could happen. But also, I think what tends to happen is we end up with autocrats, even the ones who are able to keep power for quite a long time, in the neighborhood of decades, like Gaddafi and people like this. Eventually they might get killed in the streets, and that's, I would prefer that not happen, right? That's an outcome I don't want. I would prefer that not be the institution we set up. So I think you can find examples of really successful autocracies. Singapore, Gaddafi, successful, but then eventually they liberalize, and it seems to do good things.
Eucharist, one quick question. When you look at your system of saying we should value laws, I would say if you look at like Rome and China was built on the model where they valued people more than like having a comprehensive airtight law system, and Rome focused on the laws. And Rome eventually fell because at a certain point people ignore the laws or it's corrupt. But in China, the way that they maneuvered kind of like the people, that went and worked a lot better. And then at times there was corruption, but it was able to be quickly resolved by one dynasty taking power, kind of like what Ivan said, with competitors outmaneuvering them. And I was asking kind of like that sense. Do you, I would say, or here's what I would like to ask you. How can people go and take like a piece of paper that has stuff written on it? What stops them from just pulling like a Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones and just ripping apart the decree and just enforcing things on their own, or just ignoring it?
Yeah, fair enough. Again, I think this is the political problem of just like somebody with enough power and the willingness to do whatever they want can just do things. The question is what will try to stop them if possible. And so I think the more things you have that actually have the power to try to stop them if they go off the rails that we've established, the better. The contrast, I think, between China and Rome is good. That's instructive. My point, I guess, would be like, I'm not suggesting there is like one right answer to here's what should bind a diverse people group together and here's what makes your nation a nation, here's what you need to be loyal to. I'm saying, like, again, politics is prudential and it's about the possible and it's about your historical and political situation, and so it might be different time to time, and what makes for a stable and safe and peaceful political environment is going to be different. So I all of that is to say, good questions. I don't think I have universal answers. I'm not trying to set down like, here's my ideal politics, here's how exactly we'd structure government, let's export the U.S. Constitution to everywhere else in the world and everything would be fine. So that's unsatisfying, but that's sort of my answer. Yeah.
And shout out to, I believe this is Harry Ludwig. I don't know why we have the ats over on this side for our chat names. It's still annoying. I don't know. I thought they did away with it. But shout out to Harry for the 5 gifted Gauntlet memberships. Congratulations to you lucky lottery winners. And Fuck It Button says, you guys got me. Democracy wins. This is why my girl and I voted one of you liberals no longer live. You liberals no longer live. It's 2-1, so the rules must be respected. Oh, which one of you? Feel free to vote on it. And I'll use this moment as a kind reminder to the chat. I doubled the ante for the dono goals for the show to continue from here. So you've got 19 more, and you only have 42 minutes to do it, or else this boat sails in about an hour. Actually, less than that, 42 minutes. So that's on you.
As for the vote, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't identify as a liberal personally, so I assume they're not referring to me. I think they might have had me in mind, but I don't identify as a liberal. I think the liberals on the panel might be maybe Effigy and is that Rocky, right? Or
what's that?
Yeah,
What are you, Ryan?
I'm definitely a liberal.
Rick,
I'll answer.
Rocky.
I'll answer really quick. Once again, people show that they do not know the difference between the category democracy and actual direct democracy. Like constantly making these fucking maximalist arguments against something that you do not understand. Democracy is a category that has many different varieties. We live in a representative democracy that doesn't employ direct democracy or referendums on everything.
I wanted to ask Eucharist about that. Was he actually applying democracy to basically any type of democracy or a specific one? Oh, he's not here at the moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
he just stepped away for a moment.
I appreciate it.
Hold that thought. We'll come back to it.
I
Joe!
had something to say to Eucharist, but when he comes back, I wanted to reply to one of his points regarding the way that democracy is flawed. Not because I want to say, oh, it's a feature, because I want to be this cringy kind of like esoteric Gnostic guy, but the problem that I see with the whole framing of like these barriers to political conflict is, okay, I can agree with you that you don't want to like start a knife fight because you disagreed on the punctuation of a word. But the problem is that what I see as worse than having real problems is that you get an effeminate society that cannot actually deal with real disagreement. And you need to actually be able to work that out with force being part of the equation. Because otherwise, why? Because, for example, why? Because if you, for example, show up to my door and you tell me,
what if I don't?
Fucking idiot, man.
I'm gonna interrupt you for that one because you're gonna throw out a fucking idiot. No.
Yes.
Oh, easy,
yes, you're fucking retarded.
I want to respectfully. I
Oh,
hear,
Joe, let's turn you up.
Go.
Hold on, Joe. Let me turn you
Joe,
up.
let's
I got it on
turn
my
myself
end.
up, too.
I got it my end. I think last time we turned everybody down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I turned me down too.
None of my stuff has changed.
Yeah, it's here. I got it on my end. Start talking.
There we go. Hola.
Okay.
Hello. Where'd he go? I was, dude. I was so
He can
ready
still
for
hear
that.
you. He's got his earbuds in.
All right, I wanna throw an olive branch to Ivan. So I was gonna engage with Eucharist on this. So one of the reasons why I came in, because it seems like one of the after effects of I hate using these fucking buzzwords, but democracy, liberalism, neoliberalism, is that it seems like there's a lot of horizontal violence that it allows for without there being any type of vertical violence, which is kind of peculiar, where like if we just point to history, January 6th in like the most liberal expression of fear was not going to happen. Like so it's like go in, make like we and also too, it's like not to mention when it comes to the government that was in place, it was ideologically aligned. So even in the off chance that you had any type of extreme manifestations that happened from that, the government that was in place to eventually be in place was just like, oh, we're going to pardon them. Meanwhile, like when I think of it, like if there was a January 6th for climate change, I could see a world where the Trump administration goes to the gallows of the White House and brings out Gatling guns and weapons we haven't seen in human history for a while. But I say all that to say, because there's a little bit of a diatribe, because I want to just kind of stall for Eucharist to get back. Eucharist, my friend, I have a question for you. And it's kind of for Ivan too, but I kind of know where his door is probably going to knock at. But when I think of democracy versus autocracy, I think of these as frameworks of legitimization. And before that step, you have ideologies and rationalities. So like an ideology is basically, for the uninitiated, like, what do you believe? Then the rationality for me is, okay, how do you formalize those beliefs? What's the ought? And then finally you have the frameworks like democracy, autocracy, communism, socialism. And something that I'm wondering if you ever thought about is, are all the various ideologies and rationalities that exist in the world compatible with democracy?
Yeah, I would say not all of them, because some of them are going to end up undermining the institutions and structures that make it characteristically democratic. So, you know, again, this is just like stripped down apart from ideology. I think you're right to distinguish those. I think you're right that it can be in the background. But like, if I just look at the VDEM index of like, well, over here's the liberal democracies, over here's the closed autocracies, and there's kind of a spectrum in between. I think there's certain ideologies that are going to start pushing your institutions further to the closed autocracy side of the spectrum. So the kind, whatever you want to call it, whatever political ideology Viktor Orban has in Hungary is pushing the political institutions. You know, he was elected through democratic means, and then through whatever democratic power he has, he's pushing those institutions and checks towards the more autocratic side. So no, I would say there have to be some ideologies that are going to press against either of these. Like if you have a more, maybe like libertarianism or something, that kind of ideology in an autocracy, you might be pushing for legal reforms, and vice versa if you're a communist or whatever, or if you're a authoritarian nationalist, whatever Orban is, you're going to be pushing against your democratic institutions. So, I mean, it's a good question. I think you're right. We should distinguish those things, and that makes it all the more complicated. So,
yeah, and I asked that because I saw Ivan make a face, so I think you might I think you might know where I'm going with the next question, which is, how does a democracy, in your current observation, handle this confliction, and where do you think there are potential limitations with this confliction?
I don't know what you're talking about, man. That was a little bit too verbose and long.
A little bit too verbose. Okay, so there's going to be a bunch of different ideologies and rationalities that people have in your society, whether it be autocracy or democracy. And I'm asking for Eucharist, how does democracy handle those differences as you currently see it? And what are the current limitations with how they approach that handling?
So that's for me. So I think the cool thing about one of the cool things about democracy is it does allow the kind of thing we're doing right now, which is to allow these different ideologies to make good cases. And again, because we have a structure that allows for a legitimate process of revision, if you make a good enough case, you can make some pretty drastic changes to that system if you convince enough people. So I think it allows for that. It obviously runs into issues like, for example, mid-20th century, when you have a hard clash between people who are convinced right now things have to change dramatically, and I'm going to try to do that subversively from the inside, versus people who are like, no, actually we need to have un-American activities panels and say, you know, here are the things you're allowed to believe as a good American, and we're going to punish you if you believe them. So it deals. My real answer to your question is, it deals with it in a haphazard way that is sometimes good and sometimes bad, but I think it probably does that realistically better than most more restrictive systems do. That's my
which is actually
democratic answer.
Which is actually one of my main points during the debate, that in democracy, you cannot have actual metaphysical convictions inspiring your political actions. Let's take the example of a vegan. A vegan believes that if you eat meat, you're a murderer. But does he run around shooting people who eat meat? No. I would say that's because they're a coward. Because democracy breeds cowardice. If you truly believe that you're living in a society where everybody is so evil that they're murdering people all the time, go ahead, do something about it, but don't bitch about it. Be true to what you believe. But within democracy, the incentive is to never act on those convictions, because what if you might be wrong? It's relativism masquerading as tolerance.
I push back on that, Ivan, actually.
Before you push back, Evan would like to make his exit. Go ahead, Evan.
All right. I think this has been an interesting debate. It certainly has given me a lot of food for thought, because I sympathize with the more autocracy, but it's interesting just to hear like the back and forth to go and think more about it. But I'll just kind of like end with this. It seems like ever since like the Civil War, the U.S. has been more a oligarchy than a democratic republic, and I would say between a pure oligarchy where there's several different heads that can just switch places to go and avoid true accountability. I think like a monarch or a single powerful figurehead that can go and wield all the power most effectively. And if they fail, they can easily get pushed aside and another one can be propped up. I see that as more ideal and I see that as the more practical what is happening in reality, or rather I see what's happening in reality. It's not the Democratic Republican system. It's more of a bunch of oligarchs just putting in puppets to rule in their proxy. But anyway, thank you for having me and good night.
Yeah, take
Thank
care,
you,
Evan. I
Adam.
don't think you would survive under autocracy, but I appreciate you.
And Fuck It Button says, imagine being so smart you can only spur out on variants instead of your shit ideas. Also, as a good American, I'm aware you are regressive, Orion.
Damn.
Okay.
So Ivan said something that kind of was at the door that I was knocking at with Eucharist, is that I don't think every ideology is going to fit within either of your frameworks. I just think Ivan is a bit more honest about it, so I can kind of parse out some of the bullshit. Like for instance, right? Like we can rule out socialists, communists, Marxists, basically all liberals, and a few other folks generally. Where it seems like for Eucharist, it's the challenge of how do, and I guess the challenge within democracy is that how do we get all of these different ideologies playing along with each other? Because I think if I asked Ivan the question, like, would you agree with the ideologies I described that probably wouldn't exist very cleanly in autocracy, he'd probably say either yes or probably something closer to if the ideology allows for some level of like omni-violence. So not just horizontal violence, but vertical violence and power, he'd probably be generally okay with that. And that's kind of my read, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. Like it's a tough question that you have to deal with, and Ivan is right to push back on, like, if your central concept is like my rights and liberties, then you have to figure out the outer bounds of that, because you're obviously saying there are things that are excluded from this that can't be advocated for in the public square, et cetera. Like it's not completely disavowing any sort of prescription or restriction on what you're allowed to advocate for. I'll admit that heartily. I just think the contrasting example of autocracy is, it sounds like here's what our sort of spiritual animating force is, and if you are in any way contrary to that, whether in sort of your private belief, your belief about institutions, or your political ideology, if you happen to talk about that to the wrong person, well, anything could happen to you. That's just how autocracy works. And so that is wildly more restrictive in ways, or could be at the very least more restrictive. And that, to me, I think closes off some of the good parts of the more open sort of discourse. Like, yeah, I mean, I am in some way, I would not call myself a liberal through and through, but I think there are good arguments for freedom of expression and open conversation and the sort of, shining light on bad ideas and all of that, and, lib cuck nonsense. So I like it.
I think I have to reply to that.
10 minutes, Ryan.
I'm actually. I'm gonna.
Let me speak now.
Sorry, the super chat.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Are you leaving?
Yeah, I was gonna bounce. But I don't really have a super closing statement. I like that we can all exist under pluralistic democracy. I think it's fun. Autocracies, kind of suck for everyone who doesn't align with the autocrat. But I'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Kokomo, for keeping up the tradition, supporting the channel.
Thank you, Kokomo. Bye, Ryan. Have a wonderful evening.
I think you're making a conflation between a totalitarian dictatorship and autocracy, and those two are not commensurate. You can have an autocracy where the king doesn't care what you do inside your bedroom, for example, or what you think. Now, the problem is that I think it's quite the opposite. Just saying that you think that having an identity is problematic because you're so sure about the identity, and that is totalitarian. That, to me, is a form of relativistic totalitarianism, and that is fundamentally what globalism is all about. Globalism is all about spreading this self-doubt where you cannot actually express a real identity, because expressing a real identity would go against this liberal self-doubt where we cannot actually enforce or legitimize any kind of authority, because any kind of authority would infringe on somebody's self-perceived right to express themselves.
So
liberalism is illegal.
I guess I would just say, like, yes, you're right. Technically speaking, it's theoretically possible to have an autocracy that also allows a wide measure of freedom, as you're describing. I don't think that's empirically how it tends to work out, and I think the kind of autocracy you're describing does, yes, when it has this sort of monistic, like, here's what we are, it tends to be exclusionary. Whereas, right now in the United States, if you want to go set up, right now, if you want to go establish your silly Eastern Orthodox commune in the United States, you can do that. Okay, we got the Amish, we've got weird cults down the street from me who run all these delis all over the place, and they hold everything in common, and they do their weird acts, communism stuff. Okay, you can do that if you want, and that's cool. I like that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we even have Scientology, bro.
Well, that one we might. I might go on the autocratic side on this. If that means we can get rid of Scientology. Hold on. You found my line, maybe.
Ivan, do you think that omniviolence is necessary for a society to have? So, like, the idea that you not only have the ability to actualize violence horizontally from citizen to citizen, but also from citizen to whoever is in power, whether it be the highest up or even those lower than that.
I think that's a bogus question.
What do you mean? How so?
Because it is counterfactual. You live in a world where that is already possible.
Not exactly. Not in democracy, no.
Yes. You cannot shoot a president.
Well, there's reasons why you can't shoot a president, right? Like,
but you can, though.
You can try.
No, you can. You can actually. Kennedy? Hello?
Kennedy was the example of why we ought to have heightened security.
No. You're conflating two different things. Your ideals and reality. I'm speaking about reality, not ideals.
Sure. So
I think we established a little while ago that the only corrective mechanism for most of the autocrats we get ends up being violence, right?
Well,
we established that earlier.
In the violence all the way, baby.
In the democratic society, if you unalive,
well, Ivan, that's the thing. I guess I'm sorry, not to cut you off, Frank. Go for it.
If you unalive the person at the top in the democratic society, that actually is a crime. But if you unalive the person at the top in an autocratic society, that can be considered not a crime.
Crime kind of disappears then, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Crime, rule of law disappears in the autocratic society when the power changes hands, right? So here it is. Here it is. The moral justification does not exist in the autocratic society, right? No. We as a society agree that according to rule of law, it is bad. It is bad to kill the guy at the top.
Well, I think I understand why you disagree, Ivan, because it sounds like maybe I just misread your read and your response to what I was saying, is that you believe that these things exist, right? It's possible to glass anybody. Anybody has the capacity to do that in society. However, there are certain mechanisms within society that might have people be pulling away from those type of instincts of response, and that sounds like that's a problem for you. Is that a fair read?
No, that's on the contrary. That is actually the reality of life. Of course, power begets
Somebody's
power.
got some feedback. Is somebody watching the show on their?
Nicholas.
It's you, Nicholas.
Nicholas, mute yourself.
Turn off your... Okay, I'm just gonna remove you from now until you unfuck your shit. Let me know in the private chat when you've unfucked your shit.
I gotta clip that. I keep saying it, but I keep forgetting to do it.
I disagree with what Clay said about rule of law being the source of morality. I think that's actually one of the problems in this discussion. I think the rule of law is a fiction, and the fiction is broken once a person with sufficient power shows you the true reality that the rule of law cannot constrain the power of the powerful. So, of course, the powerful will use power against the powerless. Don't parents use their power to discipline their children?
Well, that's not law, right? So what what you're arguing for then is essentially anarchy, right?
No,
no
not
law
exactly,
means
no,
anarchy.
No,
Yeah,
no.
Anti-hierarchy. There is no hierarchy in that.
You
So the
literally
law
are a brick.
have our
You're a
hierarchy.
literal brick.
Even in the monarchy, even in
Clay.
the monarchy, even in Christ, there is hierarchy, is there not? So are you an anarchist? Do you want rule of law? Do you want his law?
You're so thick, man. You're so
Do you want
thick.
his law? Do you agree with God's law? Is there God's law or man's law that you will follow?
I think God exists, but I don't think I agree with your God. So how do we deal with this disagreement?
So my God, regardless,
I
your
know,
God,
I almost-
does your God have no law?
I got
Does
you,
your
bitch.
God have no law? No. Hold on. Don't flip out. Don't spurg. Does your God have law?
Sure.
Okay, then you can't possibly be for no rule of law. You want rule of law, you just want your rule of law.
No, you don't understand
No,
what rule of law
yeah.
is. You don't even understand the concept. The
So
concept
yes,
of rule of law. No, the
I know
concept
what.
of rule of law is that the law itself is what rules.
Yes.
So-
Yes.
So
Exactly.
we can look at a
You're
different way.
supposing that your law is identical to God's divine law.
No.
You're making an
Your
argument.
God's law is supposed to be the supreme law, correct? It is what is the
It's
rule.
an extension of my
Law
person.
and rule mean the same thing. They are synonymous. Law is rule. Rule is law. This is the way it works. Okay?
Sure.
So if God's rule is the way it works, that is law. Okay? So you're for rule of law. You just want your God's rule of law.
Exactly.
Okay, so then don't say that rule of law is a misconception.
No, you don't
just want
understand the
yours.
concept of rule of law. You don't understand the concept of rule of law.
No, I do. I just explained it to you.
No.
No, I did, and you agreed with it.
Where does law come from, Ivan?
I think law comes from God.
Now we have an issue because is your God the same as Brick's God?
No.
Oh, so rule of your God is what you're saying, and that's what he's asking. And you're saying no, but yes, but no, but yes, but yes when I say no, and no when I mean yes. And
No,
I don't.
I think
you're
Ivan is just
disingenuous.
I don't know. I just think Ivan's a little bit more honest about a necessity of violence and sort of carrying out what you want in a society. And I think like that's the part he like gets a little too excited about.
No, I agree
And
that
look,
That's
I appreciate
violence-
making
I
and
appreciate
breaking the
the
social
honesty.
contract in the social contract. Like,
no, you don't
the
have
only
a
way to-
social
the only way to
contract
fix this
if a
contract
part
is
of
to
the
break the
contract
contract.
doesn't want it.
Well, I agree
You
that
don't have
violence.
a social contract without the other part agreeing to it.
there's always
So
a
what
social contract.
are
Even
you
with
talking
autocrat,
about?
there's a social contract.
Yeah, there is absolutely. There is a written law, and that is the Bible for
But
you.
can it be broken?
Sure, it
can
can be
couples
broken.
divorce?
Law can be broken. Yes, this is how it works. Yes, and then at that point, then you get punished. That's the way that works. So I agree that violence can be a useful tool, but as soon as you go to violence first, then you have broken the law, right?
So-
You break the law
Um,
by going to violence before you try to reach a peaceful agreement. That is the way rule of law works. Yes.
Not exactly. I understand what you're trying to throw down here. God damn it. But I guess like a question I have for you, this is Clark, right?
Clay.
Clay. Because Ivan asked this and he kind of was saying it jokingly, but it is like a serious question, right? I mean, like as
No, this is important
if-
stuff.
well, no. I'm saying that like, okay, if you and I have two different interpretations of what our God is saying, are you like it seems like you understand that violence is on the table, correct, Clay?
Yes, and so there's two rules in life you have: decorum or engagement, right? So we can have
Okay.
decorum or we can go straight to engagement. I choose decorum first.
Well, these are all just tools, right? These are all just tools on the table. It sounds like you don't want people to kind of default to the tool of violence. Is that a fair read?
Yeah, no defaulting. Yeah, no
And then Ivan
51%.
And Ivan just kind of seems like, fuck it, it's on the table. If I'm gonna pick it up.
Yeah, it's either believe what I tell you to believe or else I go to violence.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's inevitable that will happen because certain differences are irreconcilable.
Okay,
I
the
mean, like,
rule of law
across-
as a concept is a way of organizing force such that it's not just one person arbitrarily saying I've got the bigger stick and I win, right? That's the point. So the I agree. Yes, it's y'all are right to push back and say, hey, in the background there is threat of force, there's mustering of force, there's use of force. All that's there, regardless of what political system we have. Yes, 100% agree. But the problem I have with all this like force talk that usually comes from the force doctrine nerds in these spaces who I think are just bleh. There's a quote I want to read. It doesn't matter who it's from. It just, and I think it's just right. Okay, it just says force is never anything but a transient element in success. Immediately after it comes the idea of right, and a government reduced to being able to reach its enemies only on the battlefield would soon be destroyed. So an anecdotal example of this from history is in Sparta, for example. Right, they're really good at fighting, but their kings and their men went off to battle, and their politics had to continue at home, and so their women and their slaves even had an idea of law and right that continued the politics while the army was away in a way that's really kind of remarkable in some ways, right? So the idea of right wedded to law means there are ways we ought to use force and not use force, and when somebody starts using force in ways we don't like, we bring the force of law down on them. That's important for this, right? So I feel like we're dancing around that where it's just like, yes, Ivan, if I go read, again, back to the Republic, I know, yes, it's really easy to ask the question, if I can just do it, why shouldn't I do it? And there are good reasons not to do it, even if you can just do it, right?
Can you stop your ranting for one
No,
second?
I will not, Ivan. I will not. I let you talk. I'm going to talk, okay? Go ahead.
Talk however you like, but if you want an answer, you're going to have to shut up at some point.
Yeah, at some point. At some point, when I'm done making my point. No, go ahead.
I agree with most of what you were saying. I agree with most of it. What I don't agree with is your conclusions. I don't agree with your conclusions. Fair enough. Let's talk it out if we can. Fair enough. Let's say that there is an alternative to violence sometimes, but ultimately, it is force. Ultimately, force is applied, and I'm not one of those force doctrine enthusiasts. Not at all. But I'm simply stating a reality.
Isn't that like the whole autocracy concept though? Like you'd have to have force doctrine in order to like really establish that.
That's one leg.
Don't listen to the king, die.
No, that's one leg of the table. It's one ingredient, but it's necessary, not sufficient.
But if it's one leg of the table, then it's necessary for the table to be a table. Then no.
Yeah.
Yes, because it's actually Gnostic to say the otherwise. He was talking about rights, and there's a right to bear force. Force is part of the equation.
Rights are exercises. Like I always interpreted rights as exercises and externalizing freedom. So if something is a right, then it's everybody else's duty to honor that right. So
no, there are no rights, absent duties.
What's that?
There are no rights, absent duties. You have to be
that's
a
what
part
Joe
of
was
that.
saying. He was saying that.
Sure, yeah. They're correlated. They're correlated. Rights flow from the duty.
But you said
rights flow from duty.
Other people owe you your rights.
No. If
that's
something
relative.
Is a
you're
right,
part of the community, yes. If you're not, no.
No, like if something is a right, it is everybody else's duty to honor that right. So if you have the right to force, how does everybody collectively acknowledge that as a right? How do they do that as part of their duty? You know what I'm saying?
What?
This is just Hegel, dog. I don't know.
So
before you answer that, I do want to read a couple super chats.
So
Pardon me for just a moment. Pardon me for just a moment. Chef Dylan, we're already like running low on the super chats coming in, so I would like to read them. Chef Dylan says, whoever is on the side of pure democracy are the majority of humans likely to vote against their own interests.
No one has ever supported a pure democracy, and no one here does. So the answer is no one exists to answer that question.
Not applicable.
And that answers my question from earlier, Eucharist, while you weren't here, so I appreciate that.
Witsia says, has anyone read Frederick Bastiat's The Law?
Yes. It's good. It's worth a read.
Libertarian
dribble, but it's worth a read.
What are you talking about? Bro, like, there's just some books that I've read that are just boring front to back. That's one for me, but I get it. I get it.
Anyone read Aquinas?
Yep.
We don't have
Treatise
Don
on law, baby.
We don't have Don Juan anymore.
Like
Don Juan
The
used
old-
to be in this chat all the time, and he would say, "Have you read Aquinas?" And we lost him over the Millionaire Bachelor War. I think he
Oh,
chose
no.
the wrong side, but that's
Very
only because
sad.
Don Juan doesn't like Andrew Wilson. But that whole Millionaire Bachelor War, Don Juan left us very quickly.
I wanted
still
to
miss
make
him.
a small comment. I think you guys are too liberal to notice that force is simply is.
It
Force
simply
exists.
is.
You don't need
No.
you don't need to be given a right by other people. You might be given it the right by God, and that's it, and that's why you're.
You are stating in quite succinct statement, might makes right.
No,
No.
Yes, you have
Yes.
the
No.
God.
Might makes reality.
no, I'm not saying that either.
Well, that
might,
is
if it comports with reality, is right. That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
that is our legal doctrine according to the Second Amendment and right. So what you're actually stating is actually what we've codified. So that's an interesting thing because in democracy that exists.
Well, no, like the thing that like I'm kind of still just not quite down with in terms of like what Eucharist was speaking to is that like in America we're under again, like I don't want to get into the semantics of we're under a democracy thing, but in America we have like more horizontal violence than we have vertical. And obviously that wasn't the case across of all American history, but it seems like every single time when the rubber hits the road, the violence just tends to be horizontal. I'm not trying to say vertical violence is justified. I'm just wondering in terms of your idea, Eucharist, like, is that a feature that exists in America of this pushing towards horizontal, or is it like sort of a glitch in of itself?
No, that's a good question. I might need to think about that more before I give a hard answer. But I mean, I think it is a real problem. I don't know that it's like an endemic problem to democracy the way Ivan might want to make it to. But like, yeah, I mean, we struggle with certain kinds of violence in the U.S. that other places don't, and it's an issue. I don't know how to. Yeah, I don't have a good answer to your question. But it's something I want to think about.
And then meanwhile, it's like it's almost like again, like that's kind of the pushback I have, where it's like as much as I'll use the whole healthcare CEO thing as an example, I think it was absolutely ludicrous for all the CEOs to like have private security, where it's like, look, you know, one dude got blasted in essentially broad daylight, but by and large, across the history of CEOs, you're good. Like the board is still the person that's going to probably get you out of power faster than a bullet.
Joe, what the fuck kind of sense does that make? That's how you
It-
talk about someone getting fucking murdered?
Dead white guys die every day. It doesn't bother me anymore. Like,
They don't
like,
die
people
further.
Like
Oh,
I'm not a person to do the moralization of death. People die every day. Death is inevitable. And
I
I'm
just want to
sure
say
we can-
I vote. I don't think that's actually true, but good for
what
you.
people die every day, or
So
what?
Joe,
Your
I wanted
statement
to,
that people die every day has nothing to do with actual death. So
I wanted to speak a little bit to your question.
No worries, though.
Hang on. I want to make sure this is very, very clear because people get really upset when I talk about dead people because they think I have no soul, and maybe I don't have a soul. But
I don't think that's true. I don't give a fuck either.
I guess like my thing is that like death is an inevitability in life, and there are certain aspects